All right. This is an experiment, everyone. So I am just putting a disclaimer out there. This is a total experiment of doing a 12 days of Christmas. I don't know if I've ever done something like this before, whether it's this particular challenge that I am challenging myself with or with anyone else's challenge. And so this is actually going to be really interesting as to how I process each day that leads up to Christmas. Now, if you listen to the previous podcast episode to this one, I talk about how I came up with this receiving and giving of God's good gifts and how that leads to the 12 days of Christmas challenge. And I made a list, and the first one actually was grace. And so my goal is every day to share with you what came up for me in the revelations that I have received and who I am inspired to share my gift with another person and who that other person is and how to share that gift, right? And so the first gift that I wrote down that God has shared with me, has blessed me, that I have received is grace. And this is a gift that is so near and dear to my heart because it was so tangible since the beginning of my separation. And in all honesty, he has been showing me grace this whole time, but I was so up in my head. I was so filled with resentment and anger and fear that I could not see his hand in my life until I was just with my own thoughts and with my own mindset, and I couldn't blame him anymore. I mean, I guess I could have, but he wasn't in the vicinity to feel my anger and my resentment. And as I began to really notice and express the grace that I was seeing from him, the more I kept seeing it. And I really believe the more I kept receiving it, to the point that I couldn't help but to show this same level of grace to other people, which is why I call my podcast Leading with Grace, because that is what I'm trying to do, is to lead my life with grace. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes I'm really good at it, and sometimes I'm not. And those two parts of me happen all the time. And I really rely on God's consistent grace, the divine, consistent grace to get me through those times where I do it wrong. I do it wrong a lot of times with my kids, with my relationships, with my friends, with my family, with myself. I guess even with God, I guess you could say. But that was the first gift that I wrote out that God has blessed me with. So then in the second column, I wrote, I can show grace. So I felt like it was super, super important for me. And I want to really emphasize this to you if you are doing this challenge, which I hope you are, to make everything as simple as possible. Because once we start writing sentences and paragraphs, then it just gets too big and too complicated. And then we feel overwhelmed. And then you're not going to do it. So I just want you to make it super simple. Like if you're going to write a sentence, make it short and sweet. But I would rather you just write 3 words max on each line, right? So then I can show grace. So that's what I wrote for the second column. So then the third column was, to whom am I going to show this to? And I thought, oh, well, the obvious would be my kids, or it would be my spouse that I'm separated by. But it didn't like sit right with me. And not that it's not important for me to show grace, but I really want to seek out who God wanted me to show grace. And I was driving and kind of thinking about this, and this name popped in my mind. I hadn't even been thinking about her. And as I was thinking about her, like I just felt all of this resentment come back to me and all these fears. And instead of me trying to push against it and just tell myself I'm not supposed to feel that, I just really sat with it and just observed it. Like I was Like, this is how I was talking to myself. Wow, that's interesting that this name comes up into my remembrance, most likely the Spirit, that I have all these emotions that are coming up. Isn't that interesting? And then once I just named the emotion without judging myself or the other person or the emotion that they were right or wrong or good or bad, then the next thought that came to me was, oh, I think this is the person that God wants me to show grace. And how can I show grace? That's the question, right? And I felt that I just needed to just envision what it would look like for me to show grace to her. Like, if I can imagine it, if you could imagine showing grace to somebody, how would it look? And for me, it felt like this warm, weighted blanket, and I'm just wrapping it around her. It's my blanket. It's my, and I have a very particular weighted blanket that I love so much. And it's what I put on when I'm just resting and relaxing on the sofa. But it's me envisioning that blanket and I'm wrapping it around her. I am like willingly and lovingly giving it to her and giving her that comfort. And when I imagined that, I could feel immediately my feelings of resentment and fear changing into love and grace and mercy and goodness. And I couldn't help but just sit there and just like be filled with this love, abiding love for her as I was driving, that I got super emotional, super, super emotional. It was amazing. And I knew that I was expressing to her and showing her grace, the same grace that God was showing to me. And so if I wasn't intentionally looking for and seeking out revelation, I don't know if I would have made this connection. I don't know if I would have recognized it. And so I'm so grateful for this first day of receiving and acknowledging the grace God has given me and then gifting it to this other person. And so now it's your turn. What is the first blessing and gift that God has shown you? And so then what can you do to show that to another person? And again, make it super simple. Maybe it's verbalize it. Maybe it's express it. Maybe it is think it. Maybe it is feel it. Maybe it is write it. I don't know what that is. And then to whom? And maybe you already know who you're going to do it to. And maybe you're not sure and you need to ask God and to take a moment to hear him because he will answer your prayers. He will answer how you want to share this gift that he has freely given you, and then to act on it. So it's not enough to just write it out and then be done with it, but that it is a measure of importance to really act upon the revelation that you have received so that you can then fine tune your ability to receive, to hear, and to act upon revelation, upon revelation. And so I would love for you to share with me your experience. You can keep it anonymous if you want. Um, but I want to hear your revelatory journey and what is coming up for you and how these connective moments with Christ and with our heavenly parents is fueling greater connection and love within yourself, within the divine. Okay? All right. Talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.